you're sitting where I'm sitting, and when I was the age that most of you are, things were so different, and I think that too many young women especially take things for granted. And when I see young women like you here, it gives me such hope, and also the young women with whom I've connected on Facebook. And if you don't know, the group that I started, proud members of that left-wing fringe group called Women, please do a search on Facebook and join us. We're trying to organize something to get Harper out of power. And I'll just a little bit about background. I started that group last September after Harper made that supposedly closed-door speech in Sault Ste. Marie, thinking he was speaking to his devoted fans, in which he also he talked about various things about their, I've forgotten his exact words, but the nasty little coalition and wanting to get rid of the gun registry, and how proud he was of getting rid of the court challenges program. And for those of you who don't know what that was, it was a funding mechanism, basically, that allowed people who did not have access to lawyers to challenge the Constitution, whether they were gay or disabled or women. One woman, for example, had her rent doubled because her husband had the lease in his name and he walked out on her. So, she won against Minto landlords. So it allowed that kind of thing. And so he was crowing about killing the court challenges program, which helped left-wing fringe groups. And I thought, wait a minute, right? So I wrote this column and I said, boy, if I could, I'd have a T-shirt made, proud member of that left-wing fringe group. And I got 300 emails saying, can I have one, extra large? Right? So I started the group and we did make T-shirts. Anyway, maternal health. In January, the Toronto Star approached my friend Martin Kahn, who's deputy editor of the op-ed section at the Star, and the PMO said that they wanted to place an op-ed by the Prime Minister in our paper. Now, you have to understand that the Prime Minister hates our paper, hates our Ottawa Bureau. We are never the ones to get the interviews, the official interviews. It's always, they're friends at CTV and Global. And I just want to say thank you, Global, for being here. I am really impressed by the fact that you guys still do local news when the others have given up on it. You were the only guys to give us really good treatment on the days of the CAP protests in January. Anyway, so did we want to take this? And, immediately some of us, our antennae went up and I went, why would he want to come to the Star to write an op-ed? How many times have he written an op-ed in a newspaper? And of course there it was, maternal health, all this wonderful stuff he was going to do for maternal health. And I read it, and then I went, what the fuck, right? What the fuck is he talking about, right? It wasn't so much that he had totally omitted any discussion of contraception and abortion, which was only kind of at the back of my consciousness at that point. What really hit me was how he was referring to women as nothing but walking incubators, that he was willing to devote money to make them remain as baby makers, but not empower them in any way, even though every research, every NGO, everybody is telling us that the way to lift up any disadvantaged society is to empower the women there, and they will create jobs and they will take care of their families in ways that the men won't. And they do most of the work anyway, so why not, take economic advantage of that? But here he was writing this thing, and I'm looking at it, and my phone rings, and it's Michelle Landsberg. And she doesn't swear, but basically she said, what the fuck? And she was telling me that her husband, Stephen Lewis, who is involved very much so with Africa, was also incensed. And he and I spoke, and I wrote this column talking about all the stuff I just mentioned. He was outraged. He was going on about AIDS, which is a major issue for him. And the column slipped in the paper, at the back of the living section, as many of my columns used to go. And then there was dead silence for about 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden, it started to percolate through the system. The Hill Times in Ottawa picked something up because Stephen Lewis talked to them. Jerry Kaplan at the Globe, old friends with Stephen Lewis, he wrote a column at the Globe. And then all of a sudden, it became the issue that it became, unfortunately, badly bungled by the Liberal Party, who cannot open their mouth or take a step without shooting themselves in the foot, or it's just unbelievable. Anyway, so we have this huge issue, the maternal health issue, and there is Harper and Bev Oda. You know, you can see the string in her back because she's, every time she answers a question period, and now Rona Ambrose does the same thing. And they'll switch the subject. If you ask them about maternal health, it's about, why are you against the troops in Afghanistan? They always turn it around in some way. Anyway, so we have the issue out there. At the same time, we see the defunding of various NGOs, including, as we saw, I think, in the beginning of April, the defunding of some 24 advocacy organizations that have worked for years to help women gain their rights, be empowered, be independent, make lives for themselves. At the same time, we saw a lot of funding going to the Girl Guides. I have nothing against the Girl Guides. I never made it past tenderfoot or whatever it was at the beginning because I couldn't do my knots. But $400,000 to the Girl Guides to deal with violence against women. I mean, I mean, I don't know. Girl Guides are always prepared, so I figured they don't really need to learn about this. But what do I know? Anyway, so I decided to figure out where the money was going, and there was some talk about where some of the money was going. And it is I have a master's in business administration. Now, I'm not a brilliant accountant, but I know numbers, and it was impossible to figure out where the money went. First of all, everything is jumbled up. I got printouts of every transfer payment within the government for the past 6 years, for as long, whatever it was, for as long as the Conservatives were in power, and tried to trace how much money was going to international relations, CETA, that kind of thing, and how much was going to status of women. And it was, you couldn't tell what was being carried over from last year. They say there's $24 million more this year than last year for status of women, but then you realize that like $8 million was carried over. It was impossible to figure it out. So I spoke with Anita Neville, whose office, coincidentally, was trying to do the same thing. They had the same spreadsheets, and they could not figure it out. We do know that Bible Translation Service in Saskatchewan, I believe, got something like $400,000 to translate the Bible in obscure Indigenous languages. So, and not to knock Indigenous people, but I think they could do with better development in these remote areas than Bibles in their native tongues. We saw money going to another Bible outfit in, again, I believe in Saskatchewan, which touts itself online as a school with no buildings. In other words, it's a homeschooling thing for, not to knock religion, but I mean, I'm an atheist, but come on, to build a school, okay, in Sudan. Nothing made sense anymore. And the lack of clarity, I think, I'm not sure whether it's deliberate or just simply inept. At the same time, we have seen, I think, 2-3 attempts by private members to pass bills which try in some way to chip away at abortion. We had Bill C-484 a couple of years ago. Okay, I have to wrap it up. Yes, what can I say? Stephen Harper hates women. What Judy said.